I need to take this clay and get rid of the air bubbles, make it one smooth consistency all the way through. So I'm going to use ram's head wedging to do that. Ram's head wedging. Now this is a process to help you prepare clay for using it if you're wheel throwing or hand building. Whatever you're doing with the clay, you want it well prepared. So this is usually the way that beginners learn to wedge their clay, because it's a pretty simple process. And it has two main goals. The first is to give you one consistency throughout your chunk of clay and to get rid of all the air bubbles. So I have this chunk of recycled clay, and you can tell it is full of air bubbles, and you can tell if you look closely it's inconsistent. Some of the clay is a little bit lighter, some of it's darker, meaning some of it's a little more stiff and some of it's a little softer. So I need to take this clay and get rid of the air bubbles, make it one smooth consistency all the way through. So I'm going to use ram's head wedging to do that. So my surface is clean, made sure it was nice and clean. I have it damp. I sprayed it down because I have canvas on my board. And usually I would be standing to do this because I can use my body weight to help me with the motion. But for the video demonstration purposes, I'll be sitting here with this board. First of all, grab a chunk of clay, however much you think you're going to need. The more you grab, the more effort it might take. And basically you're going to press your palms into the clay. Okay, so I'm pressing my palms. Most of my pressure is coming from this part right here. Okay, pressing my palms in at an angle, and then I'm going to rock it back towards myself and do the same thing, only a little bit higher up on the clay. Okay, so I'm pressing this in. Okay, same idea. Pressing this in. Now you can see this recycled clay. You can see how inconsistent it is. It's starting to tear apart where the parts are different. Okay, but as I work the clay, it will even out, and you can tell it's getting a little bit better. So I am pressing in this way with my hands, and I'm pressing out away from my body as well. So kind of at an angle. I press in this way a little bit because I don't want my clay to spread out, because then it'll get too crazy and I won't be able to control it as I'm wedging. And the pressure, basically I'm taking this part here and kind of pressing it into the middle. I'm trying to stuff it down into the middle of the ball of clay. Also, one thing you want to keep in mind, make sure you don't fold any air into the clay. Like you're not actually folding it in half, because that could trap some air in here, and that's the opposite of what we want to happen. So you're really only pressing this part of the clay into itself. You're not folding the clay on top of itself at all. After a few times, the air bubbles in my ball of clay begin to pop. You can see actually where they have popped, and the clay kind of separates a little bit where there was the air. So you can see, I have an idea of how many air bubbles I still have left in the clay. Now the first couple times, it was like full of air bubbles and it was inconsistent. I mean, it started to kind of crumble apart a little bit. But as you can see, the more I do it, the less air bubbles and the more consistent my clay looks. So the question is, how many presses do you need to do? And I guess that depends. Some people shoot for a certain number for each chunk of clay that they're working on. So depending on, the kind of clay and what it looks like to begin with, they have an idea, they've figured it out how many presses they need to do. I just keep going until I don't see any air bubbles in the clay coming out, and I know that my clay is consistent all the way through. So one thing I can do is cut it in half, and that will help me see. Oh, I've still got a little bit, it's probably hard to see, but I've still got a little bit of a spiral here where it's a little bit darker and a little bit lighter in a couple spots. So I know it's not completely consistent all the way through. And it looks like I've got a little tiny air bubble here, which means there's probably more air bubbles throughout the clay. So I'm not quite done yet. I'm going to keep going. So it might take a while, depending on what kind of clay you have, I mean how it started. If you've got recycled clay like me that has a bunch of air bubbles, it's going to take a little while to do this. If you have fresh clay right out of the bag, you might only have to do this, you know, a handful of times if your clay is well prepared before you buy it. All right, so now the question is, why do they call it ram's head wedging? And if you're looking, you might be able to guess. Actually, let me give you, what if we do a couple eyes, more of a nose, and you can see the spiral like a ram's head might have. Let's say my clay is consistent, I don't have any air bubbles anymore that I see. How do you finish? I mean, that's up to you, but I just roll it in on top of itself. Nice and easy. So I've still got kind of the spiral, but now it's more of a chunk of clay, so I can cut it apart, or if I need to, I can round it out so I can throw it on the wheel. All right, so that is ram's head wedging, the basics of ram's head wedging. If you have any questions or you would like to see something specific, leave me a comment and I'll try and get to those. Thank you for watching. I will see you on the next one.